When a 13-year-old student refuses to sit down in class, no one realizes it's not just defiance. It's something much deeper. One moment will change everything. What happened inside an ordinary school that shocked an entire community? If you're watching for the first time, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful new story. The hallway outside room 214 was already buzzing with the low hum of conversation when Thompson arrived, clutching his backpack to his chest. His breath came in shallow bursts, every step sending a jolt of pain up his spine. He paused just before entering, took a breath, and stepped inside. The classroom, arranged in neat rows with the heavy scent of dry erase markers lingering in the air, fell silent the moment the door creaked open. 25 heads turned. So did the sharp-eyed woman standing at the front. "Late again, Thompson," said Miss Veronica Maxwell, her voice a blade sharpened by years of condescension. Her thin lips twisted into a look of forced patience as she gestured stiffly toward his desk. "Sit down. Now." "I'd rather stand today, ma'am," Thompson said quietly, shifting uncomfortably. Miss Maxwell's eyebrows arched with exaggerated surprise. "Is that so? And why is that?" Thompson hesitated. "My back, it hurts." She snorted softly, then turned to the class as if sharing an inside joke. "Yesterday it was a family emergency. The day before, a dentist appointment. And now you're back." A few students chuckled uneasily. "Tell me, Thompson, are you planning a different excuse for every day of the week?" Thompson's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. He couldn't explain that the pain still throbbed from the ruler she'd slammed across his lower back during last week's discipline session for not sitting straight enough. And even if he could, who would believe him? "Sit down," she said again more firmly. I can't." The room went still. Attention, sharp and sudden, gripped the space. Students stared at him like he'd just cursed in church. Miss Maxwell's voice dropped into something cold and deliberate. "You can't, or you won't." "I can't," he repeated. "My back still hurts." Her smile returned, but this time it was colder, hungrier. "Well then, perhaps we should reward such defiance. Since you feel so uniquely entitled to defy my instructions, maybe you'd like to show the class just how brilliant you really are." She turned to the whiteboard, erasing the simple algebra equation that had been waiting for the lesson. In its place, she began drawing strange symbols, swooping lines, and integrals none of the students recognized. "This," she announced with satisfaction, "is a problem from my 11th grade advanced placement calculus class. Something a real math student might attempt." Thompson blinked. The problem was complex, yes, definitely beyond what their 8th grade class had covered. But to him, the symbols stirred something different. Recognition. "We've never learned that," he said softly. "You've never taught it to anyone here." She spun around, marker still in hand. "Then maybe you should have paid better attention, dear. Or is it just too much for your kind?" The words struck the class like a slap. A few students gasped. Others looked down, suddenly unsure of where to rest their eyes. Thompson's heart thudded. His kind? He knew exactly what she meant. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. A long silence followed. Zach, the class clown, shifted in his seat and whispered, "Yo, what did she just say?" 5 minutes, Miss Maxwell declared, ignoring the tension. "Or it's a week of detention. Impress us, Thompson." He stared at the problem. His pulse raced. But he knew this terrain. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past year, while his peers played video games or scrolled through TikTok, he'd hidden himself away in the dusty back aisles of the Westside Public Library. He didn't go for comic books or teen novels. He went for the mathematics section. Mrs. Doyle, the elderly librarian, always greeted him with a quiet smile. "Back again, I see," she'd say as he passed her desk. He'd nod and head straight for the same shelf. University-level calculus, differential equations, complex analysis. His obsession had started at home when he was 7. His father, a construction worker who'd never finished high school, had been calculating materials for a new porch. "Math is the language of the universe, son," he'd said. "People lie. Numbers don't." Since then, Thompson's room had become a shrine to numbers. The walls were lined with printed theorems, sticky notes filled with formulas, and pages from old textbooks. At night, he solved problems under the glow of his phone, making sure not to wake his little sister in their shared bedroom. His parents didn't have time for PTA meetings or parent-teacher nights. His mom worked double, shifts at the hospital. His dad took whatever jobs he could find. Their absence in school made it easy for teachers like Maxwell to assume they didn't care. But that didn't mean they didn't believe in him. He stepped forward and took the marker from Miss Maxwell's hand. "Oh, he's serious," someone muttered. "Watch this crash and burn," another whispered. Thompson closed his eyes for a second and began writing. First came substitution, then simplification, then the integral. Slowly, surely, the symbols began to arrange themselves in an elegant progression of steps. His body still hurt, his hands trembled, but as he moved through the math, everything else melted away. After 3 minutes, he underlined the final solution twice and stepped back. The class was silent. Miss Maxwell stepped forward, scanning the board. Her smugness faltered. She leaned in. Her lips parted, and for a moment, it seemed like she might say something. Then the fury returned. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "I solved it," Thompson said, his voice even. "Don't lie to me. Did you cheat? Memorize it from somewhere? Use your phone?" "I don't have a phone." "Don't be clever," she snapped. "People like you don't solve problems like this." Again, the air tightened. Again, that phrase. "People like you." Before anyone could speak, she grabbed the marker and slashed angry lines through his solution. Then she tore the problem sheet in half and pointed toward the door. "Principal's office. Now." Thompson stared at the torn paper as the class watched in stunned silence. Even Zach looked shaken. But as he picked up his backpack and turned to leave, a voice rose from the back. "Miss Maxwell." It was Aisha, the quietest girl in class. What if he actually did solve it? "Not another word," Miss Maxwell hissed. Thompson walked out without another glance, the finality of her hatred hanging heavy on his shoulders. But something had changed in the room behind him. For the first time, the silence wasn't fear. It was disbelief. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of truth. The hallway outside the principal's office was dim and cold, lit by humming fluorescent lights and lined with stiff plastic chairs. Thompson sat alone, his backpack still pressed tightly to his chest like a shield. He didn't cry. He never cried at school. But the sting of shame burned behind his eyes as he stared at the gray tiles on the floor, trying to push away the image of Miss Maxwell slashing through his work, the class watching in shocked silence, and her words, "People like you," still echoing in his head. Through the frosted glass door, he could hear the sharp, animated tones of Miss Maxwell's voice. He refused to sit when instructed, disrupted the class, and then tried to make a mockery of my authority with a fake solution to a problem he could never understand. A student like that should not be encouraged. He needs discipline, not praise. "And you're absolutely certain he cheated?" Principal Williams' voice came, low and skeptical. "Without a doubt," she replied. "He's a C student in my class. There is simply no way he could have solved that problem legitimately. He must have memorized it or had help. He's trying to manipulate the system. It's deliberate disobedience." Thompson swallowed hard, clenching the strap of his bag. He'd heard teachers talk about him before, but never like this. Never with this much venom. The door opened abruptly, and Principal Williams appeared. A tall man with tired eyes and a firm voice, he looked down at Thompson. "Come in." Thompson entered slowly, wincing as pain shot through his back with each step. Miss Maxwell was seated in one of the visitor chairs, her posture rigid and smug. She didn't look at him. "Miss Maxwell has explained the situation," Principal Williams said, sitting behind his desk. "Would you like to share your side of the story?" Thompson's fingers curled around the hem of his shirt. He opened his mouth, but the warning in Miss Maxwell's eyes held him back. He looked down. "I didn't cheat, sir. I solved the problem." Miss Maxwell gave a loud, mocking laugh. "He wants us to believe he's a math prodigy now." "I've been studying on my own," Thompson said quietly, "for almost a year." "Likely story," she snapped. "Next, you'll tell us you're secretly a university professor." "Miss Maxwell," Principal Williams said with a sigh, "let the student speak." "Why were you refusing to sit in class?" he asked Thompson. "Tell me the truth." Thompson's eyes flickered toward Miss Maxwell again. He saw the threat there, the silent command to keep quiet. I fell," he said finally. "My back hurts." "He's lying," she said quickly. "This is all an elaborate act." Principal Williams studied Thompson's face. "You've been in my office before, Thompson, but never for something like this. Do you expect me to believe you suddenly became a self-taught mathematician overnight?" "I don't expect anything," Thompson said, his voice trembling but clear. "I just want a chance to prove it." Before the principal could answer, there was a knock on the door. It opened to reveal Miss Carter, the science teacher. Younger than Maxwell and always full of energy, she stepped in with a polite nod. "Sorry to interrupt. I heard Thompson was here." "Just a disciplinary matter," Miss Maxwell said dismissively. "Not your concern." Miss Carter's eyes narrowed. "Actually, if it involves one of my best students, it is my concern." Principal Williams raised an eyebrow. "Best students?" "Yes," she said, stepping further in. "Thompson's science fair project last spring used advanced mathematical modeling. Differential equations. He won first place in the math category. I reviewed his work personally." "Impossible," Maxwell said flatly. "He's failing my class." "Maybe because your class doesn't challenge him," Miss Carter replied without hesitation. Principal Williams looked between them. "Why wasn't I informed of this before?" "Because he asked me not to," Miss Carter said, glancing at Thompson. "He didn't want the attention." Maxwell stood up. "This is absurd. He needs discipline, not indulgence. If you reward this kind of behavior, you undermine authority." "I'd like to propose something," Miss Carter said calmly. "A supervised test. Give him a series of problems from basic algebra to advanced calculus. Let's see what he can actually do. Fair conditions, no distractions, no accusations." Principal Williams considered it. "That's not a bad idea." Maxwell scoffed. "You're going to waste our time on this charade?" "If he's telling the truth," Miss Carter said, "then we owe him more than time." "Fine," Maxwell said through gritted teeth, "but I'll write the test myself." "I'll review it before it's given," the principal added firmly. "We'll hold the test tomorrow morning in a controlled setting. Thompson, is that acceptable?" Thompson nodded, though anxiety gripped his stomach. "Yes, sir." "The detention is suspended until after the test," Principal Williams said, handing the slip back to Maxwell. "And, Miss Maxwell, I expect fairness and professionalism from you." She gave a tight nod, but her eyes were burning with restrained fury. As the meeting ended, Miss Carter stepped closer to Thompson. "Are you okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, thank you." "I believe in you," she said softly. Outside the office, the hallway seemed brighter. Thompson's steps were slow, but his chest felt lighter. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. That evening, after finishing dinner in silence, Thompson retreated to his room. The ache in his back still throbbed, but he ignored it. He pulled out his notebooks, filled with equations, and opened his laptop. He watched tutorial videos, revisited problem sets, ran through practice questions. Time passed quickly. His phone buzzed with a text. "Usual time today?" It was from Dr. James Roberts, the university professor he'd met months ago at the community tutoring center. He replied, "Need extra help. Test tomorrow. Important." Dr. Roberts' answer came instantly. "Library, 30 minutes." Thompson packed his things and told his mom he was going to study. She kissed his forehead and reminded him not to stay out too late. At the library, Dr. Roberts was already seated at their usual table, surrounded by textbooks. His kind face lit up when Thompson arrived. "I heard something happened at school," he said. "Want to tell me about it?" Thompson explained everything: Maxwell's challenge, the insult, the solution, the accusation, and the upcoming test. Dr. Roberts' face darkened at the mention of the welts. "That's abuse, Thompson, pure and simple." "I know," he said softly, "but no one would have believed me. I believe you, and tomorrow you're going to show everyone what you're capable of." They worked together until the library lights flickered, signaling closing time. As they packed up, Dr. Roberts placed a hand on Thompson's shoulder. "Do you want me there tomorrow?" "Not in the room, but afterward. I can speak with your principal, explain your progress." Thompson hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." "That's what mentors do," Dr. Roberts said with a warm smile. "We don't just teach, we stand beside you." Thompson walked home under the stars, equations still dancing through his mind. Tomorrow wasn't just about defending himself, it was about proving that his mind, his effort, his truth deserved to be seen. The school was still wrapped in early morning quiet when Thompson arrived, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his mind buzzing with equations. The usual chatter of students in the hallways hadn't started yet, and the scent of freshly cleaned floors lingered in the air. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, and stopped outside the conference room designated for the test. The door was closed, but through the frosted glass he could see the outlines of chairs, a table, and a single packet placed neatly in the center. "Morning," came a soft voice behind him. He turned to see Miss Carter, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. Her smile was calm and reassuring. "I thought you might appreciate a friendly face before this begins." Thompson managed a small smile. "Thanks, I'm nervous." "That's okay. Nerves just mean it matters to you. Just focus on the math. Let the numbers speak for you." The door opened a moment later and Principal Williams emerged, holding a clipboard. He nodded to both of them. "We're ready for you, Thompson." Inside the room, Miss Maxwell sat already with arms crossed in a rigid posture. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes flicked over Thompson with the same cold judgment he'd seen countless times before. "Good morning," Principal Williams said, gesturing for Thompson to sit. A cushion had been placed on the seat, a subtle but appreciated gesture. "We've structured today's test fairly. Miss Maxwell has written the problems. I've reviewed them to ensure they're balanced. You'll have 2 hours." "Do I have to finish them all?" Thompson asked. "No," the principal replied. "Do as many as you can. The problems increase in difficulty. We're not just looking for answers, but for how you think." Miss Carter gave Thompson a slight nod as she and Miss Maxwell stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind them. He took a breath, picked up a pencil, and opened the sealed packet. The first page contained simple algebra problems. Child's play. He solved them quickly, almost insulted they'd been included. He moved on. Geometry, then pre-calculus. He paused only to double-check answers before turning pages. By the time he reached the calculus section, his hands had found their rhythm. The problems grew dense, filled with logarithmic derivatives, substitution, integration by parts, and function modeling. But each formula clicked into place like a puzzle he'd solved 100 times before. Outside the room, Miss Maxwell paced like a storm cloud, her shoes clicking sharply against the tile floor. Miss Carter sat with her legs crossed, flipping through a science journal and ignoring the tension. "This is a farce," Maxwell said suddenly. "He's probably just staring at the paper. He doesn't understand any of it." "You sound afraid," Carter replied without looking up. Maxwell stopped pacing. "Excuse me? You know what scares teachers like you?" Carter continued. "The idea that a student you dismissed might actually be brighter than you gave credit for. And worse, that he did it without your help. I've taught math for 27 years. Then you should recognize talent when it's right in front of you." Before Maxwell could respond, the door opened again. Principal Williams stepped out, looking slightly stunned. "He's asking for more paper." Maxwell frowned. "What?" "He's already filled up everything we gave him." "That's not possible. It's been, 40 minutes?" "Nevertheless," the principal replied evenly, "he's moving through every problem, and now he's writing alternate solutions." As he disappeared back into the room, Maxwell's face twisted. He's cheating somehow. Maybe he hit a phone, or wrote the answers on his arm. "He was checked before entering," Carter reminded her. "You insisted on it, remember?" Maxwell didn't respond. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed tighter. Inside, Thompson worked with steady focus, annotating his methods in clean, legible handwriting. When he reached the last page, he reviewed everything twice before setting the pencil down. Then, he asked for more paper and began writing alternate approaches to several problems, demonstrating both analytical and graphical interpretations. The math danced across the page like music only he could hear. By the end of the 2 hours, he had filled the test packet, 5 extra sheets, and had written a full-page reflection on how he'd approach optimization problems in real-world modeling. When time was called, he stood up slowly, his back aching, but his expression calm. Principal Williams gathered the pages. "Well done, Thompson." "Thank you, sir," he said. As he stepped out into the hallway, Miss Maxwell looked him over, searching for signs of fraud. Miss Carter smiled brightly. "Go take a break. You've earned it." Students began to filter through the halls. Word had spread about the special test. Curious glances followed Thompson as he walked toward the library. He ignored them, choosing instead to focus on what came next. Back in the administrative office, Principal Williams sat with the 2 teachers as they each received a copy of the test. "I'd like you both to independently evaluate these," he said. "We'll reconvene at lunch to discuss your findings." Miss Maxwell didn't answer. She was already flipping through the pages with narrowed eyes. Miss Carter, however, smiled as she began reading, occasionally nodding or murmuring in admiration. At lunch, Thompson returned to the office, heart pounding. Miss Maxwell was already seated, her expression tight. Miss Carter gave him a reassuring smile. "Please sit," Principal Williams said, indicating the cushioned chair once again. "We've reviewed your work." Thompson braced himself. Principal Williams lifted a test. "You didn't just answer correctly. You explained your thinking, provided multiple methods. In fact, the only note I have is that you demonstrated university-level reasoning." Miss Carter nodded. "It's outstanding. He doesn't just understand the material. He plays with it, challenges it." Miss Maxwell cleared her throat. "The basic sections are accurate. The rest, I remain skeptical." "Why?" "He must have been coached or memorized it." "That would be impressive," Miss Carter said dryly, "especially since the test was written this morning and never shown to anyone but the principal." Before the conversation could escalate, a knock came at the door. "Come in," Principal Williams called. The door opened, and in stepped Dr. James Roberts. His presence filled the room instantly. "Dr. Roberts," Thompson said, standing. "I came as promised," he said warmly, shaking hands with the principal. "I've been mentoring Thompson for several months now. He's one of the most gifted young mathematical thinkers I've ever met." Maxwell's face twisted. "A college professor's mentoring a middle school student? Forgive me if that sounds far-fetched." "It was unplanned," Dr. Roberts said evenly. "We met at a tutoring center. I asked him to walk me through a problem, and he did, perfectly." He picked up the test packet and flipped through it quickly. "This work," he said, "is consistent with Thompson's progress. I've seen him solve these types of problems weekly. The elegance of his solutions, the way he layers logic over abstraction, this is not copied. This is lived understanding." "Even so," Maxwell said, her voice rising slightly, "he disrespected my classroom, refused to follow instructions. Because he was in pain," Carter said, her voice sharp now. "And because you humiliated him in front of the class, then tried to sabotage him." Principal Williams looked at her. "What do you mean?" Carter folded her arms. "She gave him a problem with an intentional error in it. I reviewed the board notes from yesterday. The mistake wasn't accidental." Maxwell stood. "I will not be accused of—" "Sit down," Principal Williams ordered. His voice left no room for negotiation. Maxwell hesitated, then slowly obeyed. "This situation," the principal said, "is no longer just about a math test. We have a potential case of academic sabotage. And if the physical injury claims are verified, it's also one of abuse." Dr. Roberts looked at Thompson. "Did she hit you?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "With a ruler. Last week." Silence filled the room. "I'll be contacting your parents," the principal said quietly, "and we'll be launching a full investigation." He turned to Maxwell. "Until then, you're on administrative leave." Her face drained of color. Outside the office, Thompson stood with Dr. Roberts and Miss Carter, the weight of the moment pressing against him, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Relief. The truth had begun to surface. And this time he wasn't standing alone. The next morning began differently. Thompson wasn't dreading school. He wasn't dragging his feet or trying to disappear into the crowd. As he stepped onto campus, backpack slung across his shoulder, there was a stillness inside him that he hadn't felt in a long time. The math test had been taken, the work had been read, and people were starting to see the truth. But with that truth came uncertainty. Miss Maxwell had been removed from class pending the investigation, and a substitute now occupied her seat. Thompson had no idea how the rest of the school would react. The rumor mill was running fast. Whispers had already begun the day before. About the test, about Dr. Roberts, about how the quiet boy who never spoke in class had taken on one of the school's most feared teachers, and won. He passed a group of students near the lockers. They looked at him differently now, not with ridicule, with curiosity. Some even nodded at him. He reached his locker and opened it slowly, half expecting someone to say something sarcastic, but none came. The hallway wasn't hostile today, just uncertain. At second period, he met Miss Carter outside her classroom. "You holding up okay?" she asked with a smile. "Sort of," he said. "We'll talk more later," she said. "There's a meeting scheduled today. Principal Williams wants to go over what happens next." When lunchtime arrived, Thompson made his way to the front office. The secretary greeted him with a nod and buzzed him in. Principal Williams was waiting inside his office, papers spread across his desk. Dr. Roberts was seated beside him. Miss Carter stood by the window, arms crossed, her gaze thoughtful. "Come in, Thompson," the principal said. He entered and took a seat carefully, still mindful of his back. "We've completed our review of your test results," Williams said. "There is no doubt. You demonstrated a high-level understanding of mathematical concepts well beyond your grade. Dr. Roberts believes your thinking aligns with that of a college sophomore. I've reviewed his notes. I agree." Dr. Roberts gave Thompson an encouraging nod. "Your work speaks for itself." Thompson said nothing at first, not sure how to respond. He had dreamed of being seen for who he really was. Now that it was happening, it felt surreal. Principal Williams leaned forward. "The question now is how we move forward. You clearly need a different academic structure, something that actually challenges you." "I spoke with the high school principal this morning," Miss Carter said. "They're willing to accept you into their advanced math classes 3 mornings a week. You'll be escorted over, attend those periods, and then return here for your remaining classes. We're also requesting that Dr. Roberts continue mentoring you through an official school partnership," the principal added. "And during the summer, you'll have the chance to attend a math research program at the university, if your parents agree." Thompson blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "Really?" Principal Williams smiled. "Really, you've earned it." There was a pause, then Williams continued, his tone becoming heavier. "Now, about the more serious matter." Thompson's hands tensed in his lap. "We've spoken with your parents," the principal said gently, "and the school nurse. The marks on your back were documented. A formal investigation is now underway. Miss Maxwell has been placed on indefinite leave, and this morning we filed a report with the school district and the state licensing board." Thompson looked down. A part of him was relieved. Another part was still scared. "We also want to make sure you feel safe," Miss Carter said. "If you ever feel uncomfortable, you can come straight to me, or Dr. Roberts, or Principal Williams. No more silence." "Okay?" He nodded slowly. "Okay." The meeting ended, and as he walked out into the hallway, the weight on his chest had lifted a little more. But the real shift came after school, when he reached the library. There, at a small round table near the back, sat a cluster of 6th and 7th graders. One of them, Amara, was staring down at a confusing set of math problems. "Hey," Thompson said. She looked up, surprised. "Hi. Need help?" She hesitated. "Kind of. I don't get how to set it up." He pulled out a chair. "Let me show you something." As he spoke, the others leaned in. They weren't laughing. They weren't mocking. They were listening. And when he finished walking Amara through the problem, her eyes lit up. "That makes sense," she said. "No one's ever explained it like that." Thompson smiled. "Sometimes you just need the right angle." By the time the library closed, word had spread. The quiet kid who solved the impossible math test wasn't just smart. He was helpful, kind, patient. The next day, something strange happened. Zach, the class clown who had mocked him countless times, approached him in the cafeteria. "Yo," Zach said awkwardly. "That test thing. That was real, huh?" Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." Zach scratched the back of his head. "Guess I owe you, like an apology." Thompson didn't say anything at first, then he shrugged. "Okay." Zach nodded. "Cool." A few other students joined their table during lunch. Thompson felt awkward at first, but then someone pulled out a math puzzle from a magazine. He solved it in seconds. They laughed, not mockingly this time, but with genuine amazement. Back in the office wing, Principal Williams sat at his desk reviewing new policies. A strict no-tolerance policy on physical discipline had been drafted and approved. A reporting system was being built for anonymous student complaints, and a committee had been formed to identify gifted students early. Change was coming. Thompson didn't know it yet, but that week, his story would be brought to the school board, not just as a disciplinary matter, but as a call to action. The boy who wouldn't sit down had become the voice of every student who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, or silenced. And the classroom that had once tried to humiliate him had become the birthplace of a revolution in how his school treated its students. The school board meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock, but by 6:15, the district conference room was already full. Every seat was taken. Teachers stood along the walls. Parents crowded near the doors. Students gathered in quiet clusters, whispering, eyes wide with anticipation. Several local reporters were setting up cameras in the back, their microphones angled toward the front of the room. Word had spread like wildfire. Not just about the test, not just about Miss Maxwell, but about the student who had solved a challenge meant to humiliate him and, in doing so, revealed cracks in an entire system. Thompson sat in the front row beside his parents. His mother wore her nurse's aide uniform under a cardigan. His father sat stiffly in a collared shirt and work boots, his jaw clenched in silence. Dr. Roberts was beside them, his hands folded calmly, but his eyes sharp and watchful. Miss Carter stood behind the row of chairs with a few other supportive teachers. The quiet murmur of voices fell to a hush when the 5 members of the school board entered and took their seats at the elevated table. Eleanor Washington, the board president, was a tall woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a commanding presence. She adjusted her microphone and spoke. "This meeting has been modified to address serious allegations that have recently emerged at Westside Middle School. We will first hear from Principal Williams. Then we will open the floor to public comments. At the conclusion, the board will announce its findings and decisions." Principal Williams stood and walked slowly to the podium. He held a folder in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. His voice, when he began, was low and even. "I come before you tonight with a heavy responsibility. Over the past several days, our school has been at the center of a matter that speaks not only to the treatment of one student, but to the deeper values we claim to uphold as educators." He outlined the facts. The challenge Miss Maxwell had issued, the complexity of the calculus problem, Thompson's solution, the accusations of cheating, the test conducted under supervision, the results verified by independent review and supported by a university professor. Then he paused and lowered his voice. "But what alarms me most is what came after. the discovery of physical marks on the student's back, the attempt to discredit his ability, the resistance to believing in his potential simply because he didn't fit someone's idea of what giftedness should look like. He looked out across the crowd. We failed a student. We failed to protect him, to nurture him, to listen. That cannot continue. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment before Miss Washington thanked him and opened the floor for public comment. Thompson's father was the first to stand. His voice was low but firm. We trusted this district. We work hard, both of us. Long shifts. We didn't always make it to school events, but we raised our boy right. We taught him to work hard and stay quiet, and now I wish we hadn't taught him to stay so quiet. He looked down at Thompson, then back at the board. Because while we were trying to survive, someone in that school hurt our son, and no one believed him. No one listened. Except two people, Miss Carter and Dr. Roberts. Without them, this would have stayed buried. His wife spoke next. Her hands trembled as she held the microphone. I saw the marks on his back. I asked him what happened, and he told me he fell because he thought no one would believe him if he told the truth. Can you imagine your child thinking that? And he didn't say a word about it because she made him feel small. Several parents followed, some angry, others emotional. They spoke of trust, of fear, of the culture that had allowed one teacher to act with unchecked authority for so long. Then, unexpectedly, Zach, the class clown who had once tormented Thompson, stepped up. His voice was shaky, his face red. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "but I'm in Miss Maxwell's class, and I used to laugh when she picked on people. I didn't know what else to do. I thought it was just how school worked. Then she picked on Thompson, and I laughed again. But he didn't cry or run. He just stood there and solved that problem. And when she called him a cheater, I realized we all just watched it happen. And we were quiet." He looked directly at the board. If we all saw it, why didn't the adults? The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Miss Washington thanked him, her voice more emotional than before. After nearly an hour of testimony, she tapped her microphone gently. "We've heard your voices, and we take them seriously." She paused, then read from a paper. "The board has unanimously decided to take the following actions. First, regarding Miss Veronica Maxwell. Based on the evidence presented, including the documented injuries, student and staff testimony, and the findings of the internal investigation, Ms. Maxwell's employment with the district is terminated effective immediately. Her case will be reported to the state licensing board for further review and disciplinary action." Applause broke out across the room, loud and immediate. Miss Washington raised her hand to quiet it. "Second, we are enacting immediate district-wide policy reforms. These include a zero-tolerance policy for physical punishment, a mandatory training program for staff on bias and student protection, the creation of an anonymous reporting system for students, and the launch of a new exceptional student identification and support program." She looked directly at Thompson. "Lastly, on behalf of this board, I offer a public apology to Thompson and his family. You should never have been hurt. You should never have been silenced, and your brilliance should never have been ignored." As the meeting adjourned, people gathered around Thompson. Some shook his hand. Others offered words of encouragement. One teacher whispered, "You changed this place, kid." Thompson didn't know how to respond. He just nodded. Outside, under the cool evening sky, he stood with his parents, Miss Carter, and Dr. Roberts. The street lights flickered overhead. His mother slipped her arm around his shoulders. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "not just for being smart, for being brave." Thompson looked up at the stars. His world had changed, and so had his school. Tomorrow would bring more attention, more expectations, maybe even pressure. But tonight, for the first time, he felt seen. Not as a problem, not as a liar, not as a troublemaker, as a mathematician, as a student, as a person who had stood when others told him to sit and who had spoken the truth when it mattered most. 3 days after the school board meeting, Veronica Maxwell sat alone in her apartment, blinds drawn, phone silenced, and television turned off. The official termination letter sat on the coffee table, next to a stack of unopened envelopes and a half-drunk cup of tea gone cold. She hadn't gone outside since the night everything collapsed. Calls from former colleagues had stopped after the second day. At first, there were expressions of disbelief, then quiet support, then silence. Word spread fast in education circles. She could feel the walls closing in. The television had shown Thompson's story on the local news. The boy who stood up. The boy who solved impossible math. The boy she'd tried to break. She'd switched it off before they finished the segment. A sharp knock on the door broke the silence. She froze, unsure whether to answer. The knock came again. Then a familiar voice spoke through the door. "Miss Maxwell, it's Dr. James Roberts. May I come in?" She hesitated, but after a moment she unlocked the door and opened it. Dr. Roberts stood in the hallway, holding nothing, wearing a calm, serious expression. "If you've come to gloat," she said flatly, "you can leave." "I've come to understand," he replied. She stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was tidy, but the tension was thick in the air. He declined her offer of coffee and sat down. "I've been teaching math for 30 years, he said. "I've seen hundreds of students, dozens of educators, some brilliant, some mediocre, some unforgettable. And I've seen a lot of mistakes." She didn't answer. Her eyes were tired, her posture slouched. "What I don't understand," he continued, "is why you didn't nurture Thompson's gift when you saw it." "I didn't see it," she said quickly. "You did," he replied gently. "You recognized it early. You knew he was different." She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked away. "He reminded me of all the things I had to fight to earn," she finally said. "He didn't struggle through the textbooks like I did. He didn't sit quietly, raise his hand, wait for praise. He just solved it, effortlessly. It felt like mockery." Roberts nodded slowly. "It wasn't. He struggled, just not the way you think. He studied by flashlight in a room he shared with his sister. He taught himself concepts we don't cover until college. He wasn't handed anything." She looked at him, her face beginning to crumble. "I worked for decades to become respected," she whispered. "I sacrificed everything, and now it's all gone because of one student." "No," Roberts said calmly, "it's gone because of your reaction to him. The truth is, you could have been the one to elevate him. Your name could have stood beside his. You could have been remembered as the teacher who recognized a genius." She pressed her hands to her face. He stood to leave. "You still have time to decide who you want to be. What you did was wrong, but what you do next matters just as much." He let himself out, leaving her sitting alone with her thoughts. Meanwhile, the changes at Westside Middle School were already taking effect. The Exceptional Students Program launched with Thompson as its first participant. 17 other students had been identified with advanced abilities in various subjects. Posters encouraging students to speak out against injustice filled the halls. A new anonymous reporting system had been installed in every classroom. All staff were undergoing mandatory training on bias, discipline, and student advocacy. Mr. Diaz, a young and enthusiastic math teacher, had taken over Miss Maxwell's former classroom. He rearranged the desks into clusters instead of rows and brought a whiteboard to every group rather than standing at the front. Students who had once dreaded math now looked forward to class. There was laughter, noise, questions, and collaboration. A different energy had entered the room, one based on curiosity, not control. Thompson, now attending advanced mathematics classes at the high school 3 mornings a week, adjusted slowly to his new schedule. At first, he kept his head down, worried the older students would mock him. But when he solved a problem the entire high school class had been stuck on, the room had fallen into stunned silence. The teacher, Mr. Nolan, had asked him to explain. He had done so, clearly and patiently, and when he finished, 2 juniors clapped. He left the class that day not just with respect, but with invitations to join the math team. Back at the middle school, he continued attending his other classes, where he became a quiet role model. During lunch, students came to him for help with homework. In the library, he began holding informal tutoring sessions. He never called them that. He just sat and waited, and people came. One afternoon, Amara asked him, "How did you know what to do when Miss Maxwell humiliated you in front of everyone?" "I didn't," he admitted. "I just didn't want to be invisible anymore." Zach, now sitting beside them, said, "Well, you're not invisible now." On Friday, Principal Williams held a school assembly. Standing at the podium in the auditorium, he looked over the sea of students and staff and began. 3 months ago, something happened in one of our classrooms that challenged everything we thought we knew. One student showed us what happens when courage meets injustice. His actions led to change, accountability, and growth, not just for adults, but for every student here. He looked toward Thompson, seated near the front. The applause that followed was loud, sustained, and genuine. That evening, Thompson returned home to find a letter on the kitchen table from the university's summer mathematics program. He opened it carefully, heart pounding. Dear Thompson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the University Advanced Youth Mathematics Initiative. We were deeply impressed by your application and your faculty recommendation. We look forward to welcoming you this summer. Sincerely, Program Director. His mother hugged him so tightly he couldn't breathe. His father shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug too. They didn't need to say much. Their eyes said it all. Later that night, Thompson sat in his room, flipping through one of his older notebooks. Equations, scribbles, rough ideas, and half-solved theorems filled the pages. At the very back was a list he'd written months ago, things he wanted but never thought he'd get. 1. Someone to believe me. 2. A real math class. 3. No more being called a liar. 4. A teacher who listens. 5. A place to belong. He crossed out every single one. The final weeks of the school year passed with a rhythm Thompson had never experienced before. Not the rhythm of survival, but of purpose. He was no longer drifting unnoticed through the corridors of Westside Middle School. Students greeted him by name. Teachers called on him with curiosity instead of suspicion. And every Tuesday and Thursday morning, a school van picked him up and took him to the high school for math classes that finally matched his abilities. Each morning, he entered the high school building with quiet confidence, notebooks in hand, equations already forming in his mind. And each time he returned to the middle school, classmates waited with questions, notebooks, and the occasional nervous smile. He had become more than a student with a gift. He had become someone others trusted. One Tuesday afternoon, Thompson sat in the school library helping a sixth grader named Devin understand ratios. Across the table, Amara was working with two others on graphing inequalities. Miss Carter stood nearby, organizing science club materials, watching the scene unfold with quiet pride. "You've got a natural way of explaining things," she told Thompson as the last students began packing up. "You've built something here." Thompson shrugged modestly. "I just remember what it felt like when no one helped me." "That memory is powerful," she said. "Use it." The science club was preparing a presentation for the final school board meeting of the year. Thompson had been invited to speak briefly at the event, not as a victim, not even as the boy who solved the calculus problem, but as a peer mentor and program pioneer. When the night arrived, he wore his only collared shirt, nervously straightening the buttons as his mother combed down his hair with her fingers. "You look handsome," she said, "and you sound even smarter." He smiled. "Thanks, Mom." At the meeting, the auditorium was again full, though this time the energy was different. Hopeful, expectant. The new Exceptional Students program had flourished, and teachers had shared story after story about students once overlooked who were now thriving. A musical prodigy, a budding engineer, a bilingual seventh grader tutoring English learners in 3 languages. When Thompson's turn came, he stepped to the microphone with his hands trembling slightly. He scanned the crowd and saw Dr. Roberts near the back, arms folded, nodding to him. Miss Carter sat beside the superintendent. His parents were in the front row, their eyes shining. "I used to think staying quiet made me safe," Thompson began. "That if I just blended in, maybe I wouldn't get hurt. But I was wrong. Staying quiet only helped people ignore me. And the truth is, I wanted to be seen, not for attention, just for who I really was." He paused, letting the words settle. "I know there are other kids like me, kids who think no one notices them, kids who are trying to figure things out on their own. So if you're a teacher, please don't assume silence means someone's lazy or dumb. And if you're a student, speak up for people, even if it's scary." He looked down at his notes, then back at the audience. "I'm not invisible anymore, and I don't think any student should be." The applause that followed was not the wild celebration of a scandal, but something steadier, more powerful, a recognition, an affirmation. Afterward, as the meeting ended and people filtered out into the warm spring night, Thompson found himself surrounded by classmates and teachers and even school board members offering handshakes and kind words. One parent said, "You changed the way I talk to my son." Another student whispered, "I want to do what you do, help people." He wasn't sure how to respond to all of it, but he smiled and nodded, grateful and a little overwhelmed. Later that night, as he lay in bed, his sister asleep across the room, Thompson stared up at the ceiling, the echoes of the meeting still playing in his mind. He remembered that first day, standing in Miss Maxwell's classroom, pain flaring through his back, shame heavy in his chest, a complex calculus problem meant to make him fail staring down at him from the board. He remembered the feeling of everyone watching, waiting for him to fall apart, but he hadn't. That moment, meant to break him, had revealed him. The school year ended with handshakes, goodbyes, and a signed acceptance letter for the summer mathematics program at the university. Dr. Roberts had invited him to tour the campus before the program began. As they walked through the green pathways and bright classrooms, the professor pointed out where Thompson would study, where he could get lunch, and where he might one day teach. "Teach?" Thompson asked, surprised. "Why not?" Dr. Roberts replied. "You've already begun." Thompson thought about that, about Devin and Amara, about the table in the library, about his old list with every wish crossed out. He didn't know exactly what his future held, but he knew this much. He was done being quiet. He had a voice, he had a gift, and now, finally, he had a place where both could thrive. This story reminded us that even the quietest voices can carry incredible power. What would you have done in the hero's place? Let us know in the comments if this story moved you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. More powerful stories are on the way.